Tens of thousands of football fans came to Highbury. Electrifying!
Yes, guys, and welcome to another episode of the Cannon Podcast. I am your boy, George V_AFC, and I am here with my wife, my first love. His name is Sir Wohan. How are you, good sir?
Oh, I love that. I'm good, mate. I'm good. I've had a nice weekend. The weather's been really good. And yeah, I can't complain really. Although I am missing Arsenal. Like I watched a little bit of the FA Cup today, and actually I won't lie. Like yesterday, I didn't watch any of the football, but it just hit me when I was going back home. Like, why are we not in the FA Cup? That United result is one of the worst results in Arteta's tenure for a number of different reasons. Like, that result was so bad. The misses, the chances missed, the Dalot red card, the Havertz penalty that wasn't a penalty, and then Ødegaard goes and misses.
Mate, it's one of those, you play that game 10 times out of 10 and you win 9. And the one that we lost is the one that we lost. And I'm with you. You know what? I think there's probably also this like feeling of having missed out a little bit because we've basically got the Champions League to fight for. There's a lot of people that have said like the league's done. We obviously don't have the Carabao Cup, and it's like just the idea to like that we're literally only relying on the Champions League and we're facing Madrid being next. I think it sucks a lot of the enthusiasm. Like there's people that just want to sim to the summer and get to that point because it's just like it's been one of those this season, and I'm sure we'll have tons of pod to reflect on kind of where, why, and how we got there towards the end. But mate, big news. We finally did something. Off the pitch, there was the big official confirmation of Andrea Berta. Finally. I mean, it's so Arsenal, isn't it, though, that he signed 20 days ago and that it's this idea that only now, I've got this thing where I just feel like we've got somebody that's a really nuanced negotiator that's efficient, but the Arsenal announcement team, they're unmatched, mate. They're gonna be, the guy's gonna be at the stadium, and I really thought it was gonna get to the point that they would just announce him before Fulham, like the day before. But it was such a weird one. Like, when have we announced on a Sunday? When was it? Like, I mean, for you guys, it was probably like 11 a.m. or whatever, because I got a noti at 6 a.m. So I'm like, that's a really weird announcement window.
It's crazy. Like, I mean, it's one that that was coming. And there was a really interesting article from the Athletic, and I think we're going to get into the two pieces. Yes. I think one from
Sam Dean.
Sam Dean, and the other from Gunnar Blog. And very interesting. I've got a lot of thoughts on it because I thought it was a really insightful piece. The one from the Athletic, it looked at the process as to how we got to Berta. And a few things that I want to talk about, and it can kind of go into our discussion of a certain striker as well that we've just been linked to, which is great timing for our pod, actually.
Absolutely. It's almost as if we planned for these things. Actually, Arsenal dropped news in accordance to the Cannon Podcast schedule. It's that way. That's the way around we do it. But yeah, you know what, mate? I'll just jump right into it because, okay, so from the Sam Dean article, there was a interesting quote, essentially making the implication that Gil Marin and the CEO of Atletico Madrid were the ones to really drive the most expensive mistake, some might call, with Berta and João Felix. And I think the first thing that I'm going to say to this is, generally speaking, I feel when you have a sporting director or an off-the-pitch appointment in which you can't, associate specific on-the-pitch markers, it's very difficult to find out who's responsible to what degree, because it is a decision by committee at any football club, the degree to power is something that we're going to probably debate. And I do know, like, one of the quotes from Gunnar Blog was this idea that Arsenal view them, both Mikel Arteta and Andrea Berta, on the same level. There's no reporting to either. They are equal partnership as far as power, negotiation, and input may go. So there's no somebody's reporting to somebody else. They are on the same level. Very much seemed like from Gunnar Blog that it was an Arteta-backed signing, particularly in terms of the process. It seems as though that he was incredibly influential as far as where the final decision may have gone. And where I first want to start, mate, is actually on Mikel Arteta, and we'll get through to the Berta and to the process of it all. How important do you feel that this decision had to be made, that it was Mikel being so involved, especially under the context that clearly this is a man who we all know has a lot of power at Arsenal, but I think there's been a lot of conclusions, at least on the pod here, in which we've said, okay, how much is being done to Mikel versus how much are his decisions as far as our direction off the pitch, as far as our transfer dealings, our insistence towards signings and maybe no signing in January. Like when we try to attribute blame, we're trying to understand stuff and we're trying to maybe make conclusions from a secondhand reporting of things. But how important do you think it was for Mikel to have such a strong voice in the selection within this, and to then find out that this is viewed as a partnership, a true footballing partnership, as opposed to maybe a director of football in which Mikel reports to? Do you see there being a distinction there by the club? Like, was that purposeful in your opinion?
I mean, I personally think this is the best way to do it. I think it's interesting because the fan base, from what I've gathered and kind of taken from when looking at tweets and seeing the views of a lot of different people, it's really mixed in terms of how people see this, where I think there's one side who believe Mikel really shouldn't have a dominant say in terms of who should become that big voice. Whereas the other side, and this is where I lean more into it, is I think it's absolutely imperative that Mikel has a big say on this, because Mikel, for me, is a massive part of the furniture. He is the driver of the project, in my opinion, and he needs someone there who he can bounce ideas from, and there's someone that enables that cohesion to maintain. Now, it's interesting because it's like, when you have that viewpoint and that perspective of wanting Mikel to be heavily involved in that process, that's not to say that it's Mikel's way and that's it. It needs to be someone who has a dominant personality, is not a contrarian, is not a yes man, but is someone who can really challenge Mikel and can offer his own views. And I think Berta, coming in with the prodigious amount of experience that he has and the success that he has gained under Simeone, which it was a very similar type of partnership, what it was at Atletico Madrid to what it is now at Arsenal. I think that's really healthy, and I'm very much of the idea that this is the perfect move for Arsenal. And I think going into the article from Gunnar Blog, I found it very interesting because one of the things that was mentioned towards the end of the article, it stated that Berta will be coming in immediately, and it's expected that he'll be working with the existing recruitment team, Jason Ato included, and then it was interesting because it mentioned how Arsenal have already kind of fast-tracked their summer plans already, and they've done a lot of the hard yards. And I find that interesting because this is where, and we'll get into the Gyökeres links, because I think this has given me a little bit of confidence and hope, not because of the player, but also because it seems like Berta is already having his say on signings in the summer, where I think the worry that I had was Arsenal have these summer plans, and they've done a lot of the tough work to be in a position that they're confident in getting certain signings already. But I think it's very important that there isn't this kind of, not open to change mindset with the existing recruitment team. And it's kind of like, I think it then becomes this Dunning-Kruger effect, where when we look at it relative to Andrea Berta, a lot of the people that we have at Arsenal right now do not have the experience and the know-how of a Berta. That's not to say Berta is infallible and he can't make mistakes, but this is someone that we need to extract the most out of him and get an understanding of his expertise. And if he has ideas in place already, we absolutely should listen to them. And if we believe that his ideas are actually better than some of the ideas that we already have in place and the hard yards that we have done, I think it's very important that we are open to change and that we are open to changing our plans and having that sort of mindset. So I'm quite happy actually with this news that's came out. Not because of the play, because I actually don't know loads about Gyökeres, but I like the fact that already it seems like he's really getting his name across, and yeah, he's getting his voice across, and he's already having an impact in a big way. So I'm actually really happy coming into this podcast now, just because of how that article came out. Initially, I'm thinking to myself, oh, this is good, but I'm hoping that we don't just stick with our plans because we've done that work. We are open to change, and I think that's what seems to be happening.
We'll get into like the actual Gyökeres, because he'll have his own section as far as maybe what he represents in theory and the mindset towards it. I think the one thing that maybe I want to tease out is going to be this power dynamic, because here the one thing that I am very aware of, by the way, and I think it's worth mentioning, is every new appointment receives a PR puff. It doesn't matter whether you're the best run club in the world or whether you're the worst run club in the world. Your PR will talk about how great Berta is, his journey, how unique he's going to be, and how brilliant he is as an acquisition, which, by the way, objectively he is. I don't want it to come across like I'm criticizing here, but I do feel Gunner Blog and the rest, they will always have been fed information to maybe create some excitement towards any signing, by the way. That could happen. You know, Jarell Hato was a sudden Arsenal fan from the age of 8 that will come out when he gets signed, you know, and of course, like, again, this stuff actually happens. It's not to discredit it, but it is the way of the media, isn't it? Where we see so much of it is. But I think I really want to get down to power dynamics, what your thoughts are on this process, because one thing that was in that article that I found very interesting, Berta and Mikel, yes, they're together, but they will answer to Tim Lewis and the Kroenkes. And this has been a real personal hitch for me. I'll come out with my own, and I don't want to force it on you. I don't love reading that personally. Because to me, it creates a dynamic in which Tim Lewis is the person that you're reporting to and is the voice vis-a-vis the Kroenkes. And then I asked myself, okay, well, if he's going to be the voice, which we know a large portion of the hesitancy, by the way, that's happened in the last year has come from him. Like, he is the money valve from the Kroenkes, right? And so I'm sitting there and I'm trying to say, okay, how do I ensure what happened in the last year doesn't happen again? And from my perspective, it's a completely new hierarchy. And it's a hierarchy of power in which, if you're going to decide by committee, I want to know who the committee is. And from Gunner Blog's reporting, it just seems like Tim Lewis is going to be the one to report to. And I'm a little worried about that. Yeah, I think Andrea Berta is a strong personality, no doubt. Yeah. I'm with you as far as the voice, but I have to say I wasn't in love with that reporting. And I hope it's a little bit more of him doing the PR piece that we know that Tim Lewis, but I have a feeling, I'll just come out and say it, I don't know what a lawyer is doing in the football decision-making department.
Yes, yeah.
And it's not that I don't want him. Like, this is where it gets kind of nuanced. I think he's an incredible ally to have as far as competition law. Like, if something like the Super League was to come up again, you want as Tim Lewis, a lawyer who understands what the rules are going to be in those conversations. Like, you need to have lawyers in a club. It's not that you don't have to have lawyers, but what I get very confused at is the overall recruitment strategy. Because the last year recruitment strategy was with Tim Lewis being the faucet to the Kroenkes, and their line was, we don't want to make a mistake, and that we don't see the value on the market, and therefore we rather not dip in. Whereas I'm sitting there saying, in a year you didn't find value? What's going to change, and what potentially could happen in the future if that exact same thought process is going to happen as well? And I guess I'm just going to talk about my fears towards it. I hope that we start seeing a committee decision, because I find it very hard to believe, mate, especially with the reporting that Gunner Blog himself has done as of January, in which Josh Kroenke sided with Mikel. And I'm sitting there saying, okay, if it's a committee, and you're telling me that Josh sided with Mikel, and obviously Ado is with Mikel, and obviously Tim Lewis is there, but the decision ended up not to act, and yet Mikel was adamant to act. Josh was adamant to act. We've already gone through a decision in which the majority said yes, act, but it didn't happen. Yeah. So now we've got a new person in Berta, who's obviously got a strong personality. I hope that means that he's going to enact himself. I mean, there was a lot of really great personality descriptions from Gunner Blog as far as saying he's a reserved man to the journalists, but as far as clearly a fiery personality, getting into fights with City, he is not afraid to talk about his position. But I guess I'll just ask you, do you share any of my concerns as far as saying, okay, has the structure changed? You've just basically subbed in, my fear is at least, you've subbed in a strong personality. But I think the biggest fault of the last year was that the committee didn't carry their decisions. Like, the majority decision, I would have been okay. I'll even go as far as to say this, mate. If I don't agree with the club, that's a subjective thing as a fan, right? But what I want is, if there's a majority decision by stakeholders at the club, I want the club to act in the majority, not in the minority. Yeah. And to me, That happened last year. So there is a little bit of a fear in the way that they're reporting that they haven't changed the makeup of the committee. It's just Berta's being added to it. But I was kind of thinking like maybe the makeup of the committee needs to change. I want to keep football people. And if there is somebody answering to the Cronkies, I'd much rather it be Garlic, who is pictured with Berta and who has experience in football, who has experience being a director of football for the freaking Premier League as well. Like, I guess I just don't understand that. Basically, long rant. Do you hear those fears? Do you agree with them? Do you maybe disagree? How do you think Berta fits with that power mold? Keeping in mind, by the way, he's used to operating with a fiery manager in Simeone and a very vocal CEO in Rafa. What was the name again? I don't want to butcher this. There was the CEO.
It begins with G, I think his surname, isn't it? Or
something Rafa Jill Marin, I think is the name.
Something like that, yeah.
Don't butcher. But the point is, he had a very vocal CEO that was in charge of really leading the João Felix. So it's not as though Berta is a foreigner to having dynamics from above and a very fiery manager that he has to compromise with. He's been in that fire to the degree. But do you at all worry that in terms of the reporting and on that side?
I'm actually very happy you spoke about this because this is something that I wanted to get into, where it's felt like very much over the past year where you have Mikel, you have Edu, you have these ideas that are happening in terms of transfers and who to bring in, and then you have the Kroenkes at the top, and there's this middleman in between in which some form of messaging is not getting across, and there's something blocking that, and that for me is an issue because we saw it in January. We saw players coming out explicitly saying, we are very short. We're bringing on Kieran Tierney, at left wing, Declan Rice's own words, and it was very well documented that Mikel wanted to bring someone in. I think it was also an article, I don't know if it was on The Athletic, but it was from somewhere where Mikel was pushing heavily for Ollie Watkins. He really wanted that to happen, and it didn't happen for
and backed
for
by
reasons.
Josh as well. That was the reporting from Gunnerblog that Josh agreed with Mikel.
Yes, yeah, exactly. So there's this person there or group of people who are blocking some form of messaging that is going from the people who are involved in football. And this is the Dunning-Kruger effect in full flow, right? You've got these footballing men, who are experts in their field. And then you've got someone who is not an expert in football making these decisions, supposedly speaking. And then you're thinking to yourself, well, who really is best equipped here to be making these decisions? It is the people who are involved in football. But what gives me confidence with this, right, is that let's say we have these issues in the summer and in the following January window. Berta doesn't strike me as someone who will stand for that, and I feel he'll be someone who will make it very vocal, and then it becomes a lot easier to pinpoint what is actually really happening. So that's something that I'm really happy about. But I'm hoping that there isn't that stumbling block in the summer. I don't think we will know until we see it happen, really. Yeah. But it is something that did worry me with regards to the article and the reporting. But I'm hoping this, like you alluded to, it's just more of a PR to kind of, bring up the people involved in the whole process and their responsibilities and roles. But we will just have to wait and see. But it is something that did leave me a little bit cautious. But at the same time, I'm thinking to myself, bringing someone like Berta, Arsenal surely aren't naive in terms of knowing who they brought in. This is someone with a very dominant personality. And if things don't go well, I think it can get turbulent very quickly. And I think fans will know the issues around it as well. So,
and you know what I will say too, again, so just to contradict, because I'm trying to, guys, as a podcast host, you have to sometimes play devil's advocate. Okay, so I've got the problem, but I will say, okay, Alex loves doing this, so I'm trying to put on my Alex hat. At the same time, the way that it's been reported that Mikel was so adamant gives me hope, because this is also a guy, you talk about Berta being a guy that won't accept it, so won't Mikel. Like, Mikel will leave. Like, and at least what I'm confident in, it was, I'll take the hit in public, but you better damn well get me my guy. And that gives me confidence as far as the process went, in which we really isolated some really top names. Olabe, Ashworth, Thiago Scuro from Monaco. There was a wealth of knowledge. And to be fair, the process to find the director was perfect. I couldn't, if I was to draw up my perfect process, so to speak, get a domestic stud, get a foreign stud, get somebody who is maybe newish to their job that has done a really great job with new ideas, Thiago Scuro, at Monaco, relatively new, but was brilliant. Olabe, a really well veteran operator from a club we clearly like. Okay,
Yeah.
so that's a subjective thing. I view Berta as objectively no link to Mikel, no link to the Kroenkes, no link to the Premier League. And that was just an objectively seasoned veteran that was available. And they interviewed him. And for him to win the job, and actually for Mikel to end up going with him over maybe a lot of the reported links to Olabe was the Mikel-led factor about there being a previous relationship. And I'm excited for this. The fact that he's chosen somebody with no real links to Mikel, no real links to the Kroenkes. He just won out purely on the interview and the symmetry that must have developed. And that gives me huge confidence because there's no way you promise Mikel, who has just been lied to for over a year as far as recruitment goes, and to Berta, who you just come in, who you know what kind of a personality he is, saying, look, this is the process that we will give you. This is the rope we'll give you to operate with. I'm telling you that they will walk if they don't see it.
Yeah. Do you know what it is as well, George? What really excites me about this as well is in that article from Good on the Blog, it mentions it very explicitly. Arsenal decided they had two choices in the end. It's whether to maintain continuity with Jason Ato or go for change. And usually you're thinking continuity is the one that's going to allow you to maintain this steady growth that keeps on going. And change is something that is seen as sometimes something very scary, and it can be because you're doing something that is non-Arsenal like. I think that's what Berta is. It's not an Arsenal type appointment, and that has its problems because it leaves you into a realm of uncertainty, even though we know the track record that he has. But it also gives you really good confidence from an Arsenal fan point of view of this club really want to make this challenge now sustained in the next window, and they believe it is really time now to win, and I think this is what this Berta appointment does. And I also think what's interesting as well is there is this narrative about Mikel being a dictator, a dominant personality in the sense of it's his ideas and nobody else's. It's like that is something that I think people have referred to a lot, but I always go back to it, and I know I've rinsed this a lot, but that Miguel Molina video that he did, lecture about Arsenal, one of the things that he talks about is this structure at Arsenal, and something he mentions is the academy coach. Now, this isn't just your academy coach in terms of, with the youth team. This is someone at the club who has got a specific role in which they are there exploring ideas across the entirety of Europe, seeking new trends, new approaches, new sequences, and how we can kind of implement that in our game model. What that tells you is that Arsenal under Mikel are very open to new ideas. And this is why you saw Steve Round go. And because you're seeing people who aren't really offering as much now to the entire club, as opposed to when Mikel first came in. And there's always this process of chopping and changing, bringing new ideas. And I think this is what it is now with Berta as well, where we've got someone who brings a lot of experience and he knows top quality in forward areas. And that is something that Arsenal absolutely need as well. So I think there's a lot of real positives to take from this, and especially the process of how Arsenal were open to change and didn't go for the easy option. Jason Ato is the easy option, isn't it? It's kind of like it's not an option I think Arsenal fans would have been frustrated for, but it's something in which it allows the club to keep going as they are, and they would be able to fast track their summer plans. But now with someone like Berta coming in, it's big change, and it's something that excites certainly me, and I think the general consensus amongst Arsenal fans, whether they like Arteta or not like Arteta, it's exciting. So yeah, I'm actually really.
So you mentioned it's very un-Arsenal, and I kind of just want to tag into it, and it's going to lead into Gyökeres, and because so for me, I want you to give you a chance to kind of explain why you think it's very un-Arsenal. For me, it is Berta being a very nuanced negotiator. This man isn't opposed to agents. Arsenal opposed to agents. This has been so the biggest thing. So I'm really interested to see how this Arsenal don't leak anything versus suddenly he's in 6 hours later, a link from David Ornstein in which Gyökeres is interested. Now, as far we will talk Gyökeres, but I find it funny the use of the media. Will that change with Berta? Because Arsenal and Arteta has been somebody very close-lipped, but will it be a more nuanced approach? And this is something that I do believe. I do believe Berta will use the media more. I do believe that he's going to be very sly, not really in terms of being transparent. I do think we'll see a lot more smoke screens. I do think that we will see the media used a little bit more as a weapon as far as Arsenal's transfer dealings are concerned. Why? Because Berta is more open to agents, and when you add an agent potential into any dealing, they tend to leak stuff. And I think we may see the media used a little bit more than we have in the past as far as negotiations. There might be more public negotiations in play, A. But B, I think we've got a really efficient negotiator, mate. Like if you look at Atletico Madrid and the turnover, I'm talking not just buys, but also sells. The number of deals that man has been in charge of per summer has been quite extensive. The turnover rate has been large. And when you're looking at a summer that I think everybody kind of sees that as maybe a likelihood for Arsenal, there's going to be a lot of sells. There's going to be a lot of buys. And, people are saying minimum 4 to 5 signings in buys and probably in sales. In addition to what? 4 maybe leaving on loan and on freeze already. Like that's a lot of business. And that I think is the very un-Arsenal thing, to go and get one of the most veteran people like that. And there's a lot of transferable qualities that we've already talked about that I just think make this appointment both objective, but also, like you said, very un-Arsenal-like. But I don't want to take you out of the conversation. Like, what are the vibes that give you very un-Arsenal in Berta? And I'll end on, how far do you think the Berta reach will go? Is the link just him stretching his muscles right now as far as power goes? And how far do you think that power will be in action this summer?
I mean, it's interesting because the agent point was what I wanted to go into as well. And I think that can be both a positive and a negative with regards to agents getting involved. And, we've seen many times players coming in with very dominant personalities from their agents. And when things aren't going well for the player, the agents make their name very well known, and it's documented. And we've seen times where players have been dropped and agents have came out and they're criticizing the manager, and it can bring a level of friction that is something that isn't the most, it isn't very healthy. But I think the thing that made me think it's quite un-Arsenal-like is because I don't think Arsenal have made these types of decisions before, in the sense of someone who can be a disruptor. Like, as we mentioned already with the Tim Lewis point about, there being this middleman or someone who seems to be blocking what is happening with what Mikel wants and what, as you alluded to, Josh Kroenke was trying to fast track as well. Someone like Berta, I think, can be a disruptor who has a lot of pedigree, a lot of experience, and will make himself known if things aren't going the way that he wants it to, alongside of Mikel. And that's what, for me, made it more kind of like un-Arsenal-like, because I didn't think... I had a feeling like if this wasn't Mikel there, Jason Nato would have got the job. And then it's the kind of very easy move of Arsenal going with the same sort of idea, same sort of process. But now you've got someone else who's coming in who has things, that can be of concern, if things aren't going well. So that's the angle that I had of it, in terms of why I didn't think it was Arsenal-like, and that's what excites me. We tried it before with Raul Sanllehi, and it didn't go very well. But I'm not of the opinion in which just because it didn't go well with Raul Sanllehi doesn't mean it won't go well again with someone else who does like to dip into the contacts with the agents as well. So that's the way I saw it. And the media thing I find very interesting, because, it's like David Ornstein is the mouthpiece for Arsenal. And when he does bring out news, like the one we just saw with Gyökeres, it tends to be very substantial. But now, is it substantial here coming out with that kind of news with Gyökeres? I still think it is. I think there's a lot into this already. But it will be interesting to see how it kind of pans out with the media, because how does that communication go as well with Mikel? Because Mikel's someone being very close-lipped, right?
That's what I mean.
And doesn't like leaks. And then someone like Berta, if we see this happen of more leaks surfacing, is that going to cause friction? So... Yeah.
And who knows? And maybe it's part of the plan. Maybe it's Berta saying, look, Mikel, you got to do this. It's a negotiation tactic. Like, maybe this is something that you need to be a little bit more open. And we don't have to... That doesn't mean that Arsenal open the doors to their intentions, but we can use the media as a way to gain an advantage in negotiations. Maybe it's Berta being like changing Mikel a little bit in and being nuanced as a negotiator. And that's what I'm interested to find out. Like, I don't know any of this stuff. And I'm with you. I think that Gyökeres is significant. Let's just jump into it as far as the Gyökeres League. Have you seen enough of like Gyökeres in other matches, or is most of your like exposure kind of how he's been against us? Because we have seen him up close and personal in the game this season, personally. But how are you feeling about Gyökeres? Do you like the interest? Do you not like the interest? What do you think of the player?
Yeah, I mean, I've watched one full 90 minutes and then rewatched it as well, obviously.
There we go.
I watched 2 games technically.
So 180.
It's a 180, yeah. And I have to say, right, I mean, the supply lines to Gyökeres in the game was non-existent. You know, we had a fantastic game against Sporting, and it was very much like he had the graveyard shift for Sporting on that day against 2 dominant operators in Saliba and Gabriel. And I came out of it feeling quite impressed from what he showed. There were so many moments in which Gabriel was so dominant, and he didn't let him settle, and it became a very, very convincing game from Gabriel's point of view, who scored in that game as well. But what I really liked about Gyökeres in that game is like he gets shots off very easily in situations where you don't feel the shot is even a possibility. I mean, there was one moment where I think it's in transition, and again, it's the graveyard shift. The ball's lumped long. He does well against Saliba. Gabriel defends him really well to show him down the line, but Gyökeres still gets a shot off, and I think he rattles the bar as well. So I like that aspect of him, because for me, when we look at Arsenal right now and what we do lack, it is players who have that instinctive touch when the ball is fired to them in the final third and being able to get shots off quickly. And there is something for me about Arsenal playing their food too much. And someone like Gyökeres, from what I saw in that game, you know, strikes me as someone who would certainly help Arsenal a lot in that regard. But it's a very small sample size, and I came out of it thinking to myself, what do I value Gyökeres from that game? Taking into consideration his role in the team and how Sporting struggled to really get him involved and have a lot of attacks and pinning Arsenal deep into their box, it was very difficult for Gyökeres to have a substantial impact in the game. But from the little service that he did get, I thought he did quite well, and it gave me the indication of a player who's in that kind of 55 to 60 million pound price tag. And that's where I came out of it from. I think he gives Arsenal things that we lack, but there are other things that I'd need to watch more of to see, you know, if we'd need to tweak our game model in terms of how we attack in the final third to get the best out of him. But the small bit I did see, I liked him, you know, so yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we've obviously done a scouted on him, so I'd encourage everybody to go see the scouted.
Go watch it.
You know, it was look, the conclusion of the Gyökeres for me is he is a good, not great player. For me, it's not somebody that I feel is raising the ceiling, and it's more to do with stuff that he does, by the way, as far as his contact from goal. His interaction with midfield seems kind of loose. As far as his shots, for me, one of the biggest criticisms that I had personally, he needed a lot of time in the box to release the shot, but he gets shots. He generates his own shots, and that's something he certainly does. And what I did like is that he's that off the ball channel runner, like across the front line. That is something, as far as a subjective thing, that I love in my striker. And I think that's what we've needed as a difference. Somebody that's in the channels that can, you know, impose himself. He can do that. I don't think it's great. He's got to work on some of his physicality. But I do think it's somebody that generates shots. Like, Gyökeres won't leave a game without at least 2 shots. And this is a shot-shy Arsenal. So from that perspective, It's definitely something that he does help with. As far as, you know, some of the real quality, like when you talk about 55 to 60 million pound, like I'm going to probably ask you this. So if Gyökeres is in that price range, which he probably is, by the way, do you associate that as a win now forward? Or is that, if you were to get a Gyökeres, does that represent somebody that's still a chance? Like, if we're going to have 2 forwards, right, and Gyökeres is one of them, are you sitting there saying Gyökeres plus that second one, can it be a Nico Williams, or does it have to be a Barcola? Do you know what I'm trying to get at, as far as like, okay, I get it, he's good for the price, but like, what's the level? So if we're gonna categorize Gyökeres, right, is this, I wouldn't call it a chance, but maybe you can. Like, he actually hasn't done it in a top 5 league, but he's killed it outside the top 5 league, and as far as the championship, as far as in Portugal, his goal scoring record's clearly phenomenal. He's by the way held it up in the Champions League. It's not as though that this is suddenly a guy that, you know, it's very few and small sample, but he still, you know, gets output against very good opposition in Europe so far, but I would say it's still objectively a chance where we've got a guy that's, how old is he again? I don't want to make this up.
26, I think he
or
is.
26. Yeah, so I
25,
think he's 26, right? So this is a guy that is 26, so I don't think he's young. Like, this is a prime age player that hasn't played in a top 5 league. Do you view it as a chance? What's the level? Say we were to buy a Gyökeres, like what would be your demand for the second forward? And by the way, he'll be 27 this June. His birthday's in June. So if he was to come, he will arrive and he'll be 27 years old. So I don't think that's a ironically it's a chance to me. There's questions I have of him, clearly in the 55 to 60 million pound range, but this is a guy that's prime age, like in terms of his career. So where do you stand, I guess, on that categorization of Gyökeres, and what would you demand with it? Like, what level of forward for you to be comfortable overall on the forward recruitment?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I'd certainly say I'm a lot more big on our squad and their chances of winning the league next year. I mean, I went into this season as well thinking Arsenal have a very good chance, and then obviously there was a lot of things happening in terms of the injuries that really prevented us from having any sort of real continuity in terms of being able to field a similar 11 game in, game out. So I do have big hope of Arsenal's chances before the start of this season. And I think with a Gyökeres, again, I need to watch more, but from what you've mentioned to me there in terms of his ability under contact and something that is of a worry and it's not refined, I'd look at Mikel as being someone, well, that's one of the things he does really well with forwards in terms of their ability under contact and improving them in that regard. I look at Kai Havertz, I look at Eddie Nketiah, I look at Gabriel Martinelli, I look at all these players that we've had, Aubameyang as well. Aubameyang's hold-up play towards the end of his Arsenal career, well, I'd say in his second season, the Mikel, he really showed significant promise in that regard. It's not the best because it's never Aubameyang's game, but he improved in that regard as well. So there's always the chance of Gyökeres improving in that aspect. But I think that in terms of the winger, I think I actually don't see it in the sense of like Arsenal need, if Arsenal sign Gyökeres, then we need to get this caliber of a winger for Arsenal to win the league. I very much think you can, if you get a Nico Williams as well, I think that gives Arsenal a very good opportunity to win the league if you do get more fortune with your injuries and you're able to have similar kind of look to a Liverpool next season. So I don't really sit in that camp, George, in terms of like, right, so we've signed a Gyökeres, then we need to get, the top end left wing, even though that is what I'd want. But I still think you can do something very, very big with a Gyökeres if he is the player that I think he is watching more later on, and someone like a Nico Williams. But I'm guessing you don't feel.
So here's kind of the question, because obviously I think people are going to ask us, and like it's funny, like we're going to do questions at the end, but 3/4 of it is what do you think of Gyökeres, as far as some of the questions. But okay, Isaac is the name on everybody's lips. When we've talked about X Factor, win now, forwards, all those descriptions about box efficiency, those kind of things, right? And I put a poll out that I found very interesting because the amount of people that talked about conviction, and I put out a poll essentially saying, so if you were to buy Alexander Isaac and Nico Williams, for example, and the reason I was asking this question is you've got now a win now forward in a project that's worth a certain amount of money, or 2 win now forwards that are a little bit cheaper in Semenyo and Mbeumo that equal the price of an Isaac, and another prospect in Sesko. But why don't we just throw in Gyökeres? Because they're similar prices, Sesko and Gyökeres. And Gyökeres is like, I would say at least prime age. I still think it's a chance. I have my personal questions on the signing itself, but same price. So I'm going to ask you the question. Because this whole idea about how we exit the summer, I think it's important. We need to define our expectations now about what we think is the minimum so that we can properly judge Berta and Arteta and like what we're asking for as a fan base after this last year where we didn't even buy a forward. So
yeah,
do you think it's as simple as buying, and I don't want to say, so please correct me, I don't want to put words in your mouth. Is it as simple as saying we just needed options? Which is why, by the way, I asked the 3-player thing. That was kind of my thinking, like 3 very good players. I don't think that they are world-class right now, but 3 phenomenal players that would basically guarantee you to have a perfect front line every match. where you've got Semenyo, Mbeumo, and Gyökeres, let's call it, which will be the same price as a Nico Williams and an Isaac. Like, but there's two philosophies there, right? Option one is I'm never going to have a forward where it's not at least good, right? You're going to have very good forwards all the time, even with injuries. Or is it, okay, no, I don't care about that. It has to be a win now forward. We must take the next step as far as guaranteeing it. And if that means sacrificing maybe potential depth and maybe sacrificing potential fees, it's time to finally buy into the forward. It's fine. It's time to use that as the large proportion of your budget. Where do you stand maybe on that poll, but also the philosophy of what we need to get done in the forward department this summer?
So, as I've always mentioned, I don't think Arsenal are far away from winning the league, right? So I don't believe the gap is enormous. So I don't think, there is, you either sign an Alexander Isak or not, and that is the difference of Arsenal winning the league. Arsenal can win the league without an Alexander Isak. I'm very much of that opinion. And that's where, for me, I'm of the opinion of, I've always been someone where as long as the player coming in improves Arsenal in areas that they lack in, and we also are given more insurance, an insurance policy of depth, that is the options, that is the avenue I'd always go for. I don't fit into the idea of, okay, we sign one stellar name, an Alexander Isak, and then you get a Nico Williams. I mean, that I think gives Arsenal a fantastic chance of winning the league. A fantastic chance. You've got one player who is already in the prime, and he is, in terms of on form, he's up there with the Lewandowskis, he's up there with the Harry Kanes. He's been that good this season, and his progress. But then the other option as well, you're saying Gyökeres, Mbeumo, and Semenyo, right? That's what you allude to. Those three. Arsenal can win the league with that as well. They've got a very good chance of winning the league with that. So I don't think there's a wrong answer here as well. The Mbeumo one's very interesting because I was so big on Mbeumo, but after what Ethan has been able to do in the absence of Bukayo Saka, not to say Ethan's role should be Bukayo Saka's understudy, because Ethan is an interior by trade. But I think Ethan's quality on the right-hand side, if we can complement him properly and not allow him to do the exact same role as what Bukayo Saka does, which is what we saw against Manchester United, I think an Mbeumo doesn't become of a big priority for me anymore, even though he gives you that strong quality up front as a false nine. I do see that potential, but I don't think Mbeumo is that big on my radar right now. So going back to your point, I certainly lean more towards the philosophy of adding depth, but also making sure that you improve the things that Arsenal lack right now. And I think Arsenal can win with that. I don't think it's as much of a guarantee as an Alexander Isak, let's say, for example. But there's always that concern of you sustain a big injury to Alexander Isak. And I don't think you can think like that anyway in football. But let's say that happens. It then becomes of a worry, doesn't it? Where okay, you've signed this big player who has injury concerns of the past. Correct me if I'm wrong, George. But it's there's a bit of uncertainty there as well. So
I find it funny because Alexander Isak is not a topic of injury discussions, but when we talk about all of our players, injuries
because
are
I think he's had a good couple of 2 seasons for injuries. I think, but again, I think last season he played 28 Premier League games, I think it was, or something.
Yeah.
So
you know what? I think you made a very good point. I don't think there's a wrong answer. I asked the poll because I just find it funny. Everyone spoke.
What was the answer from the poll? What was the dominant? Was it the dominant one? Isak and Williams.
The dominant was option 1, Alexander Isak and Nico Williams, and it garnered something like over 6,000 votes. Like, it really hit off on Twitter.
Is that you, George?
No. I think people used it as a way to really debate. But mate, if you look at the quotes and you look at the comments, any answer but option 1 is the answer. Any answer but option 2 is the answer. Like the conviction,
I don't think that.
It wasn't just 1 or 2. It was like. But I found it funny, mate, because it was pretty split. And as far as polls go, I was surprised. I think in the end, the final poll was, 65 to 35%. Basically 60-40. Mate, that's not decided as far as the temperature of the fan base goes. There's definitely a preference to Isak, but it wasn't 90-10. It wasn't a convincingly across the board. And I think this is part of the problem where I'll wrap up this section, but I kind of wanted to ask you the whole forward intent, because we as fans don't know what we want, and that's okay to say, because we're just frustrated without the trophy. And I think this is where we're at, and people are talking very much in convictions about certain names and people, but ultimately they don't have an idea of what they really want. And, I think both options, like you said, can. The one thing where I will lean into, I'll just put my stab into it. I'm with you. I want the team to be solved. My only issue is I want two things solved in the summer. I want there to be a level of box efficiency that is addressed as far as being able to move people in the box, but also having efficiency within the box. We generate some of the most chances in the Premier League because we enter wide from the box. We need to maximize that. And I wanted to improve the transition to shots totals, the numbers. I needed us to shoot more, and specifically from transitions. I need us to make better decisions in transitions that lead to shots. We end up having the best press in the world, and we don't generate shots from it. It's a problem for me. And so those are two things that I want solved. I think sometimes I lean into, and when I look at it, and I think while the option thing can go, sometimes I think the message that something needs to be sent to Arsenal, it has to be important. I've been thinking a lot about this, especially under the context of Saliba, Saka, and Gabriel. These extensions, and compare it to Liverpool. And I'm looking at a Liverpool team, by the way, right now that are winning the league with still three of their best players and world stars not signed up. That to me is like the scariest position to be in a club. And you've got Konate 1 year left on his contract, already having massive links to both PSG and to Madrid. And I'm sitting there thinking, you're freaking winning the league and your best players want to go. Something's not right there, right? And, I look at the Alexander Isak, and I've really changed, because as far as the player, it's not my subjective preference of striker. I think he's phenomenal, world class. But I have to tell people, like, I am an Osimhen guy, a Sesko guy, and yes, to an extent, the profile of Gyökeres. I like a striker that drifts and powerful in the channels, that can go across the front line. I'm a mover. That's kind of what I love, and that's what my eye loves. But when I look at an Isak, I'm loving the impact that an Isak has on others and what it sends to others. And I'm actually looking at that as the added transfer value, quite a bit more than the player himself.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is I'm just starting to see what he does to Martinelli. Boom. I think we've created a third forward there. And I think, what does he do to an Odegaard? If he makes Odegaard fit within the Zubamendi pivot, we've now gone from having a really dangerous situation with a captain that's maybe undervalued to now being, again, the 80 to 75 million pound asset that we had a year ago. Like, that's a huge transfer added value. And then I start to think, okay, if I'm lining up with Bayern and I've got Gyökeres and I don't know, maybe like pick your left wing that you could maybe be comfortable. But if you've got Gyökeres and Barcola, for example, and you're comparing that to an Isak and a Nico Williams, I think both people will look at that and respectfully, very respectfully, will look at Gyökeres as the good, not great. Barcola, oh my God, I'm afraid. They will look at Alexander Isak and say, oh my God, I'm afraid. Nico Williams, good, not great yet. Could be great. And I think that fear factor is the next step to becoming favorites for the title. And so there needs to be a fear factor forward. And I'll be honest, if we were to do a Gyökeres or a Sesko, by the way, anything not named Isak, I think that winger has to be a holy crap, who is that moment that is universally feared. So when you mention Barcola, I become happy. Even if I have my doubts on a Gyökeres, I sit there and I say, oh, I know what I'm getting with Barcola. That, to me, when I exit the forward recruitment category, I'm saying, yeah, that's a win now forward who's a ceiling and a floor raising talent and somebody that is universally feared. But I worry, like, if we get a Gyökeres, a Nico Williams forward, I think you can win the league. But I'll be honest, after having a year of having not bought a forward, and then we delayed it to basically get somebody that can win us the league, and I find myself repeating the same rhetoric that I did last summer. Do you know what I mean? Like, okay, I'm
Yeah,
using
no,
the
I hear you.
buys
Yeah.
to say I can, but I want to say, no, I will win it. And I'm going to be favorites. And I've got to be honest, and maybe it's just me. I'm not in the camp of if it is like a Nico Williams along with a Gyökeres. Like, I need one forward that is universally feared in global football, at least one recruitment. And if it's the only one, I may have to debate with you if that's even worth it, because that's teetering on. I don't think it's worth to just buy the win now forward if it doesn't mean to coming in. Like, if it's just Isaac and just Isaac alone, I don't know if the risk is worth it.
Yeah.
But I am in this category of, like if we were to do a Gyökeres or a Sesko or whatever they represent, they're just representing a forward that is good but not great. And I look at our front line, we have tons of good, not great, but only one. Holy shit, it's Bukayo Saka.
Yeah. I hear what you mean.
And I'm like, the best teams in the world have at least two in their front line. All the dynasties, every single dynasty. Can you actually, you correct me if I'm wrong. Has there been a dynasty that has won by committee and only had one best of their generation talent? Like, I'm looking back, right? Look at your Barças, your Madrids, the best Bayern teams. They had Ribéry and
United's as well.
The United, they had Rooney and Ronaldo. They had
and then like Van Persie, and then you've got like the likes of Dwight York, and then Andy Cole and Van Nistelrooy.
Maybe people in the comments, I can't think of one off the top of my head that had only had one holy shit forward, I'll call it, in basically Bukayo Saka. Now, does that mean it can never happen? No, but I'm just saying it's unlikely. Like, when I try to take myself out of it, so that's what I think I'm getting towards.
It's interesting though,
so
George,
I need to wait and see. But yeah. What do you think?
I hear a lot of what you're saying. I think with you, I think a lot of the frustration, it boils down to the fact that Arsenal have spent so long and not got a forward over the line, and we've got into this situation where we need significant reinforcement there. Whereas if we did it incrementally, we wouldn't be in the position that we're in right now in terms of the amount that we need to do. I think the Alexander Isak thing is very interesting, because for me, what puts me off is the fee that it could be and it could take to get Alexander Isak over the line. That's where I'm a little bit worried about it, where I think if Newcastle get Champions League, I think that becomes very difficult to do, George, with the money that they're going to be quoting. And then I have to ask myself the question, well, is this worth it? Is this worth the amount of money that they're quoting? It could be around 140, 150 million that they quote, because that is what Alexander Isak represents with Champions League. And then is that sensible? I know it sends the message, and it does send shockwaves. Let's say it's Liverpool and Arsenal going from. Liverpool would never spend that much money on a single player as well. I'm yet to see them do that. We've done it with a Declan Rice. We did something that was not Arsenal-like in terms of bringing Declan Rice to Arsenal. That wasn't Arsenal-like. That is the definition of Arsenal doing something that was unprecedented.
And we've bought the guy that negotiates those deals in Berta.
Exactly.
Talent.
So it's interesting, because then that's where I think to myself, is this the right thing to do? But going back to the Gyökeres thing, right? And you've watched a lot more of him than I have. If Gyökeres comes to Arsenal and he plays 35 Premier League games, how many goals do you see him getting?
15, I think, in the Premier League.
15.
I think part of the problem is we kind of said it in the scouted. There was he gets a lot of space, and part of the problem why the European record held up is because in Europe you get a lot more space, and you have a look at us, right? And he did really well against us in the second half, right? But a lot of those, by the way, that post moment, it was in transition. It was in transition. And I'm looking at the amount of times that we're going to face those type of transition states. Like, he'll thrive against a Forest. He'll do great again. He'll help us against a Forest. He'll help us against a Fulham. He'll help us against those types of teams. I just don't know. Are we going to face enough game states that maximize his skill set? There was the contact thing. I worry, because that's the Premier League's defending. I don't love when I don't see a forward that's at least consistently doesn't have to ride contact, but even transfer it well. Like, he really has trouble interacting with midfield as far as being an outlet over a press with contact from behind. If you give him space to run, he's happy. And he's happy with that. But how often do Arsenal have space to run? is the question. So, but I think like he'll help us, mate. Like, and I think 15 goals in 35 Premier League games is still 1-2. Like, it's still a very good record. I just don't know if he'll be great. I have questions if he could be great. About it. And I think that's what worries me, because I don't mind that as one signing, but then I'd want the left wing that I know will be great. And I think, let me ask you, like, really quickly. So, like, say, because I know you may not have watched Gyökeres as much, right? So it might be difficult for you to say. But, like, let's say Gyökeres is very good, but he's not the 1-goal-in-1 guy. Like, say that's his potential. Do you demand the second signing to be, or, because again, I don't want to put like words in your mouth, do you think we could be okay with like a project like Nico Williams? Like, could it, like, if we exited the forward with that, like, what are your, I guess, minimal, and we'll end on this, the minimal expectations from August 31st, whatever the heck the transfer window closes as far as forwards go? What does Rohan want to see minimally?
If let's because I've not seen a lot of Gyökeres, right? So let's spin it to Sesko. Right, and let's say we got Sesko, right? Because I think Sesko and Gyökeres, I think it'll be similar amounts of money in terms of the transfer fee to get one of those two, right? If Arsenal sign Sesko, now my left wing choice has always been Bradley Barcola. I've said that many times.
Yeah.
I remember last season watching a bit and I thought, wow, this guy looks seriously good. And that would be someone I'd want Arsenal to push so hard to get. But let's say Arsenal got a Nico Williams. I wouldn't be upset by that. I personally wouldn't. I think that gives Arsenal enough to win the league. And I think it gives them a good stab at the Champions League as well, as to where we are in other departments. I really do think that. It's not to say that would be my preference, no. But if you're asking me how I would feel coming on the back of two of those types of signings, I'd be happy as long as we address other areas in the squad as well, because I think we would have added quality that certainly helps Arsenal right now. They aren't obviously, as you and Alex both allude to, in terms of win now. They're not guarantees as of right now. But do they improve Arsenal? Absolutely, in my opinion. And I think that is what Arsenal need from a baseline point of view. I'll reiterate, it's not what I would want ideally, but I think it's also very important to sometimes be open to other possibilities and seeing what's done. That doesn't mean you just kind of reverse engineer your mindset and think, okay, Arsenal got these two players, and I'm happy with it. You have to have your own opinion. You have to think for yourself. But I do think that would still be something that I'd be content with personally. I know you wouldn't, because I think of
No, I wouldn't. I think one of the forwards needs to be, for me, kind of like how I described a holy shit. It's him, because I even tried to take away like the emotion of how I felt with a year outside of having a forward, and like I was thinking about this, like, again, I want a dynasty. Like, my goal isn't just to win the trophy. Like, I want to go through a period. Man City had their time. I want Arsenal to have a time in which in the next 3 to 4 years, I'm winning 3 Premier Leagues and a couple Champions League. And I'm looking at all the dynasties that I've grown up with in my 30 years, right? And I don't remember a front line that didn't have at least 2 forwards that said, holy shit. Like, I look at the Madrids. I mean, they were stacked. Benzema, Bale.
Yeah, they've always been stacked. Always.
Barca, though. Neymar, Luis Suarez, Messi. Look at the best United teams. Like, you even talked about Andy Cole, right? But, like, for God's sakes, Rooney, Tevez. You look at some of the teams that won, as far as even Manchester City. Like, I look at it and it was always Aguero, De Bruyne, David Silva, Leroy Sané, and Mahrez. Sterling, because at that moment he was a holy shit kind of player. I look at Liverpool, the Firmino, Mane, Salah. Mane and Salah were 2 guaranteed that you were like, holy shit. And Firmino was still good, maybe debatable if he was great, but still 2 in that forward line were holy shit moments. I look at our best teams that had won titles, and even the ones that had gotten close, by the way. I look at the RVP moment and we're like, okay, in that team, by the way, that we didn't win the title, some might argue we had Walcott, but who was the other forward with Robin Van Persie? And part of the reason he left was because of that. And then I look back at our Ozil Alexis moment, right? In which we then got Aubameyang. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, Aubameyang, is he that holy shit moment? Like, it was close, but those three never really got the time to really go and continue. And I think that was the closest thing that we had to having two forwards that were holy shit in the last like 10 years. Otherwise, it was always one that was really, really good and then a phenomenal supporting cast.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's kind of my struggle with it.
Oh,
But I'm also open to the idea, like I could be wrong. You know what I mean? And I'm sure we can, and I'm with you that we can win the title. I just don't know if I personally can go into will win it without one of the two forwards that we get being described as kind of that holy shit type of thing.
Would your mindset change if we see Liverpool go without a Salah next season, go without a Trent next season, go without a Van Dijk as well?
Yes, as far as the next year, but the dynasty and like the sustained success part, I don't know, because I don't think Liverpool personally are our biggest dynasty challenge. I think it's going to come with Chelsea, actually, just because they just have so much resources, mate. And
They do, yeah.
we have been so lucky that they're so stupid. I cannot tell you.
But that's the thing. Will they get it right with the manager and who they bring in there?
They
Because
may
that's
not,
where
but they throw, mate. They're going after having Estevio, Kendry Pays, to then buying Giovanni Kinda, who is a phenomenal, like, mate. That talent is stupidly talented at right wing. And then I look at their squad, and they added Dario Isugo to Leslie Ugochukwu, Romeo Lavia, Andre Santos, who they already have. Like, they are the team. If I'm being honest right now, they're the team that I could fix one window. I hate to be arrogant like that. I think they get a Victor Osimhen, a Juan Garcia, a goalkeeper, and another left wing. Chelsea are a problem, in my opinion. You add those three players alone to what that Chelsea team is, start to worry about what they could do. And I'm starting to look at who the next challenge could be. I think a lot of my Liverpool stuff, I think it depends. I need to see Arne Slot on the market. That's probably a fair thing, I'll say. I actually don't know what that is. So you know how you say, like, you lose all those players? Well, I don't know. What's the response, like, with Michael Edwards? I probably need to see that before I was dead set on it being only Chelsea. But I will say, I'm with you. If those three leave, I would say, yes, the next year I'd be very confident in Arsenal monopolizing the league. But then, I don't know about the dynasty. That's my one. That's
Do you
my
know what it is
question.
for me, George? Right, I said I'd be okay with those signings with Gyökeres. I know, like a Sesko and Nico Williams. But what I wouldn't be happy with, right, is let's say Alexander Isak is available on the market, 110, 20 million. Newcastle failed to get into the Champions League, and Liverpool come in and they get him, and then it's like Arsenal didn't even put their name in that hat. That for me would be frustrating, because you've got a certified player there at a price. When we signed Declan Rice for 100 million 2 seasons ago, to get a player of that caliber as a striker, 10 to 20 million pounds more.
Crazy.
That would be really bad from Arsenal. But this is where I think a lot of it depends on what the price is for certain players. And where certain teams finish as well. Because I think that's where my mind could change in terms of being okay, not okay. If Liverpool go and spend 150, 60 million pounds on Alexander Isak, I wouldn't be having a go at Arsenal in that regard, spending that much money on an Isak personally. So, yeah, a lot of it does depend on what happens from now to the season in terms of when Newcastle finish, let's say, and then what that price is going to be for an Isak, because that is the big name right now that everyone's talking about, isn't it? So he is the reference.
And by the way, mate, I truly feel the first two names that get done, by the way, are Juan Garcia and Zubimendi. And that's going to be done in the first 10 days in the window. And we will, in my opinion, see what Newcastle lands, because it's as simple as Champions League or not to me. Like, if they get Champions League, I will boldly say, stop talking about Isak. Like, you're not spending 150 million pounds, period. And I do believe that, by the way, right? Then it's about transitioning and see how effectively we do transition. But speaking of transitions, wow, what a horrible one this is going to be. But we got to talk about Fulham, our next game, really quickly. Mate, Bukayo Saka, pictured about being back in training. Mate, I have not been so happy. I did tweet this, okay? I have not felt this way about a player since like Cesc Fabregas or like
Yeah.
Robin Van Persie. There's just a confidence that his presence alone makes me feel safe. And it's just this guy, this man does things to me, and he just makes me feel comfortable in my team. And when he's there, I think there's a chance. He
Yeah.
gives me that
Yeah.
confidence. No matter where it is, it could be Madrid, the Bernabeu, whatever. I've got him on the pitch. There's a chance. You will never see me cower with Bukayo Saka on the pitch. But you look to Fulham, mate. A, how do you integrate the Saka of it all? A. B, how are you feeling about that game? Kind of some of the matchups. Give me your overall thoughts about how you think that will maybe set up and in the integration of Saka.
Yes, me and Alex spoke about this in terms of how we can kind of get Saka ready as possible for that high-octane game against Madrid in a couple of weeks' time. And for me, I think the game against Fulham, I'd look to give him 10 to 15 minutes if that's a possibility, and then incrementally speed that up, notch that up against Everton, and then I'd start him against Madrid. And I'm thinking if Bukayo Saka can give me 60 minutes against Madrid, I'd be very happy with that. And I think that would be a really good way to kind of transition him into that Madrid game. But in terms of Fulham, I mean, this is our arch nemesis in recent times. We haven't beaten Fulham since that game at Craven Cottage in 2023. Remember the 3-0? You know, the blistering start, the 3 goals that happened quite quickly with Trossard getting a hat-trick of assists. That was the last time we've beaten Fulham. It's been a team that we've struggled a lot against, and it's that type of team that have had success against Arsenal in terms of a tactical kryptonite. And I've said this many times, Fulham, alongside the Portos, alongside the Bayern Munichs, these sorts of teams, Arsenal have struggled against. And I want to see us adopt new solutions. I actually really want us to give Ben White a start in this game personally. I think it'll be very good for us to kind of integrate Ben a little bit quicker now because he's had a bit of time, obviously, with the international break. He's had a couple of games as well, cameo against United, started the game against PSV. I thought we saw some promising things, some things that clearly show that he's not up to speed yet. But I think with Ben White, actually, when I look at Fulham, when we're talking about defeating a mid-block that is physical and they're looking to squeeze the spaces in the centre of the pitch, those switches are very important. And Ben White, for me, from an Arsenal point of view, he's one of Arsenal's best switches. And I remember last season at the Emirates, a lot of the success that we had against them in that first half, if you recall, comes from that Ben White switch and when we're isolating the left-hand side. And we're actually really unlucky to not get a couple of goals in that first half against Fulham in that game. So, yeah, I think, especially with Ethan Nwaneri, and Bukayo Saka, I mean, you'll be able to touch on this a lot more with your background, but I think with Ethan, again, being stylistically the most similar to Bukayo Saka in that sense, albeit not the same type of player, which is why you can't ask him to do the same role. I think this is why it's important to get Ben White in this game quickly as well and get him fast-tracked where he can play more substantial minutes because someone like a Ben White can really help Ethan Nwaneri as well from the get-go. That is the way you can really unlock Ethan on that right-hand side. So, yeah, I that's what I'd certainly look to go with. I think Saka, if he can get 10 to 15 minutes towards the end, that'll be perfect for me. And then we can speed up in the Everton game. Yeah,
I'm with you on the integration. I won't add much more. I mean, the guy just needs to have a scaled approach, and we want to get him ready for Madrid, right? If he's ready to start, surprise me, but I trust the physios. I really don't want to get into this. Exactly. They're professionals. They know what they're doing here. As far as the Fulham of it, mate, every time I face Fulham and you tell me the record, I know the record. And I'm like, it is so easy to manipulate this mid-block and we just don't do it. Now, and I will argue, not to sound a little bit big-headed, but I feel every time we walk out and say it's been a coaching error, as opposed to being really outfought as far as some of the lineups that we suggest, as far as some of the balance that goes into midfield when we've lost to those games, I've always felt that they were Arteta improvement moments, as opposed to I'm losing this because the opponent's been brilliant. Like, for example, there are things that I didn't agree with on Bayern, but Tuchel coached like a Bayern win as far as what he did in that match, right? I look at the Fulham matches and mate, like the balance in midfield has always felt a little bit off as far as we've got a lot of ball to feet options, and I'm looking where's the stretch there.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at this game, mate, and you mentioned Ben White. I think Martinelli is going to be really important
Yeah,
to
for sure.
another one that's going to come back, and I'm really interested to see what Miles can do in this game, because I think this is a Miles game as well on the inside, as far as being released and finding and being brave to find people. Um, I think that the one thing that I would just like to see, I guess, is I would love to see us press Fulham. I would love to see us meet them and not let them dictate. Um, and I'm kind of with you, where I would like to really show maybe a dominance, for me at least, in terms of controlling the Anthony Robinson outlet, because I think that's just going to be so
Yes.
important. And uh, I think it's great that we don't have to face Reece, and I think fundamentally the Robinson outlet is probably one of their biggest things, and of course the Iwobi aspect of it all, ironically, I think is one of their better progressors as well on the pitch. And I think that really being able to control those two players, Robinson and Iwobi, are going to be critical to us being able to control the amount of chances that Fulham get. So, yeah, I'm excited for the game, and kind of like you, mate, I'll just end on a really nice positive. I've missed Arsenal. Like, I just want to
Same,
see
mate.
them play, mate.
Yeah.
Like, and I know that's such an easy cop out answer, but I said the tactics before. I think you've covered it brilliantly. I miss them, mate. Like, it's been 2 weeks. I really want to see the boys again. I want to see some
Same.
patterns. I want to see some things, and I want to start getting into it, because you're right. I think for me, Madrid is going to be a slow burn, and I just think that the rest of this season needs to be looking at that tie and trying to give it the best we can. And I just want to come out being proud. I don't want to feel like I got the game taken away from me, or that you know, I got a matchup that I didn't deserve. I
Yeah.
felt at times, whilst Tuchel coached a Bayern win, I just felt robbed. I'm like, oh, God, I wish we would have pressed. Like, I wish we would have shown our
This is the
potential.
thing for me. Yeah, this is the thing for me as well, George, because I tweeted about it, where if we go back to that Bayern Munich game last season, and I was there for it, and that first 15 minutes genuinely was scintillating from Arsenal.
It was so
We
good.
were ridiculous, and it came from Martin Odegaard stepping outside the block, coming deeper, getting on the ball, Ben White joining high, Saka coming inside, Kai Havertz playing these bounce passes, holding us. I think it was Eric Dyer at the time. And then the Saka goal, it comes from that specific sequence of Odegaard deeper, White higher, Saka coming inside. And then we have another opportunity in similar fashion, where Ben White has a really good opportunity to make it 2-0. He doesn't. And then Tuchel tweaked things, and he was a lot more aggressive on that right-hand side, very similar to what West Ham did to Arsenal. And we didn't really have any answers in terms of creating freely after that moment. But this is where I want Arsenal to take really good lessons from that and look for other avenues and other ways of being able to really hurt the opponent. Because on that day, our left-hand side was toothless. And we've seen this before with Arsenal this season, where we've not had that consistency through the left-hand side. So let's say Real Madrid do a similar sort of thing. And I don't think they will do, because Ancelotti is a different type of coach to a Thomas Tuchel. He has his own ideas and his own ways, and he is very much of... I don't believe Ancelotti is that kind of ideological type. I think he is someone who he has a set of players, and he's thinking, how do I manage these big egos? How am I able to get the best out of them? Forget about what I believe in. Let's see how I can get all these best players in the best possible positions to hurt the opponent, right? And that's what he will do in this game as well. But I want also to take lessons from the experience that they had in that Bayern Munich game. And I think what's really interesting, because me and you miss Arsenal, right? But I have a feeling a lot of Arsenal fans, this Fulham game, they don't really care about it, because there's not a lot riding on it. I don't know about you, but that Chelsea game, right? I know it was a really poor game of football, but it's still Chelsea, and we've beaten them. And
win.
again, it's a 1-0 win, and it's like everyone's like, oh yeah, whatever. It's like we just beat Chelsea, But I think this is the general feeling that people have, because there's nothing on the line really in the Premier League, and that's why the Champions League, there's a lot riding on it. And I just want also to showcase their talent and really give it their all. And I think there's a really good opportunity to do that. You don't have to win the game to be proud of the team. But, I just think everyone, is kind of like fast tracking towards that game. They don't really care what's going to happen in the Fulham game or the Everton game, really. So
they're holding.
But I don't feel that. I miss them.
To say F this and F that. They're really let loose, because there's the odd chance that they do something against Madrid. You know what I mean? And that hope, mate, it's why we support It's why we're fans, and it's why we're supporters of the club. So I'm with you. I can't wait to see the boys. I can't wait. As Gooner or proper Gooner, as much as you want to talk, whatever Lee calls us, top Gooner. That's what it is. I miss them. I do. I flat out I miss the boys, and I can't wait. As we go, let's transition. We're gonna go to questions, and so I will look at some of the Twitter ones, and in the meantime, maybe you can just check Discord. But mate, there's so many stuff that's like, are you happy with Gyökeres? What do you think about Gyökeres? Hi guys, how do you feel about the reported Gyökeres link from AFC Emir 11? Personally, I'm skeptical. He suits us profile-wise. Do the reports that he's a Berta target give you optimism? We kind of talked about that stuff already, and there's even from at Saka is GOAT. How happy are you with Gyökeres? Would you prefer him to Sesko and whatnot? So there's a lot of, what do we think of Gyökeres? We kind of had a big section on that in the pod. But I thought this was an interesting question. So what would be the differences that we see in terms of dealing with mid and low blocks and transitions if we got a Sesko versus a Gyökeres versus an Isaac? And let me add Ollie Watkins to your link, Cast, just because those are very different types of forwards at 9. And then it followed up by saying, and how would your left wing target choices change if we were to move Martin Odegaard to left CM to accommodate an Ethan Waneri? And that is from at Kieran E52. Thank you for your question very much, mate. So yeah, here, mate, we'll split it up. How do you feel the two different center forward profiles? So one, a come to forward like an Isaac and Ollie. How does that differ to maybe the Gyökeres and the Sesko for you? How does that change transfer plans also if you were to say that Martin Odegaard's influence then kind of changes to move a little bit more to the left? And if we were to shift the use of Martin Odegaard from our current dynamics to fit in an Ethan, does that change any transfer plans for you?
I think it does, because for me, a lot of it is about balance, right? If you're looking to recruit a centre forward who's more of a drop deep and look to link and connect with others, I want that left winger to be someone who can really spin in behind and give you that threat over those spaces. And this is where I think with an Alexander Isak, Martinelli works really well with an Alexander Isak. And when you're going back to the biggest success Arsenal have had through the left-hand side, it is through the 2022-2023 season of Gabriel Jesus and Gabriel Martinelli as your centre-forward and as your left winger. That partnership, that chemistry, that is what you could extract from an Alexander Isak and a Martinelli one. But I think if you're going for someone who's going to be more of that kind of channel runner who's looking to stretch, then I would want that left winger to be a bit more creative and to be a bit more ball to feet and to be able to be the guy who is looking to deliver that quality in the final third, as opposed to someone who is receiving the ball, in behind. And I actually think with Martin Odegaard drifting towards the left-hand side, again, I think someone who's going to be on the shoulder and looking to spin in behind. This is where Martinelli would come into play as well. So I think it does change how you approach the window, because there's no point signing a couple of really, really good forwards, but they don't complement other players that we have right now. Because as much as it is about bringing quality and elevating the squad in that regard by simply going, we need to dip into the market, we need to sign this player because they have this quality. Okay, that's great. But what about what we have right now? How does that affect the Bukayo Saka, who is the linchpin to Arsenal's attack? Does it help him? Does it get more out of him? Because that is way more important because of what Bukayo Saka is. So it depends, doesn't it, really? So
you know what? It leads me to another question by @Gunner_Harish. Thank you for your question. So here's a question for the main pod. Let's say we sign Isaac. What happens to Saka's status as Arsenal's best player? How will they benefit from each other? Will one play second fiddle to the other? And how does that change if you were to get a Gyökeres? So I'll maybe just blow this up a little bit because there's a lot of questions there. So I'm really insistent on the win now forward, right? Do you think that's a dressing room impact? So I've talked about all the ways that Isaac could help a Martinelli and Odegaard. Is there a risk with a Saka, who this is his team? But by the way, we've never given him the contract to say that it's his team. We've never platformed Saka, in my opinion, to say, we all love him. We do. But I think
he's not the top earner, is he? He's not the top earner.
No, he's not the top earner. and we don't platform him in the way that we should. Like, I mean, look, mate, he was having an alien season before he got injured.
An alien season, right, George, without being in the preferred circumstances. He was literally so many games. You give him a piece of string. There you go, Bukayo. It's not in to that degree, but in essence, in how you look at it, it is someone who is creating a lot of these chances and getting a lot of these moments in isolation in which he is just, this is what the best forwards do. But you can extract even more, and you can get even more alien-like quality out of Saka by doing more for him as well, can't you?
Well, so the question might be, how do you, like, even a Barcola, like, that's a win now, that's an ego, right? Like, I guess, what's the mental profile symmetry that you look for? Because, so we've talked about the player profile, so Isaac with a runner makes sense. When you get a Gyökeres and when you get a Sesko, by the way, your winger probably needs to be a little bit more creative, like a Nico Williams, a Semenyo, somebody that's a little bit more ball to feet that can carry some of those creative responsibilities between the lines that maybe a channel running center forward at the moment struggles with interaction midfield. Like, we know the player stuff. Do you feel like there's any, like, mental profile, like, compliments that need to happen? Like, a Gyökeres is probably coming in as, like, he's 27, so he knows what he is, but he's also not a superstar, right? So he can't demand superstar respect. Havertz, by the way, when he came in, is coming off of, a season. We all know Havertz, but I wouldn't describe Havertz as a superstar person. This is a guy that does a lot of work for the team, right? Like, so is there, and I don't know the answer, but I'll just blow it up a bit, is there a risk towards the win now, say a Barcola, the Leaos, the Osimhens? Like, when you talk about these win now forwards, they bring a very different level of risk. And does that complement Saka? And what does that mean for Saka? Can they coexist? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
For me, it's not too big of a worry, because I think when you ask Bukayo Saka, right, what does he really want? He wants to play with the best players.
Yeah,
it's as simple as that, isn't it? He wants to play with the best players and the players who are going to extract more out of him. And it's a case of, like, you can be a win now forward, let's say, but also not have a big ego. That's also a big possibility. There's certainly, obviously, there's certain players in which you're looking at them and you're thinking, yes, they're a fantastic player, but what do they actually do outside of football and the impact they have there? But I do think with someone like a Saka, you ask him, what does he want for Arsenal? Do you want a good player to come in or a great player to come in? He'd want a great player to come in, wouldn't he? Because that's what helps the team, and that's what's going to get more out of Saka as well. So I don't worry too much about that personally.
Yeah, me neither.
Unless there's always certain individuals who could be. I think I got a bit of criticism of my Mbappe take in the previous pod where
you did.
I wouldn't want someone like a Kylian Mbappe, because I think what could happen if it goes pear-shaped could be really, really significant. That's not to say he's a bad egg, but that's sometimes the concern that I do have. But not every player comes with that sort of baggage, even if they are fantastic, right? So, yeah, I'm all about cohesion, but I'm also about the fact that you do need to get great quality in, and great quality can also come with not these dominant personalities, egos that can be detrimental.
Yeah. It's a real tough one for me, mate. Because I'm bound. I want to be non-hypocritical. Okay, and the one thing that
I know where you're going with this. Yeah.
Yeah. The one thing that I really struggle with is if I have sat here demanding win now, and I'm worried about the mentality of the win now, like. Someone's just gonna tell me to F off. Like you're not being consistent. So here, the one thing I will say, what has made Arsenal challenge for the last 2-3 years has been an out of possession win by committee, not by individual. Yeah. And so I don't think that. I think, by the way, I'll put Thierry Henry. I think Thierry Henry has one of the biggest egos I've ever seen in my life, as far as arrogance went. That man was aura personified. Is that enough to the ref? Like, he was a character. Yeah. But I also don't think, if you look back at old tape, Henry wasn't selfish. He also got the assist like, they're not synonymous. You don't have to be a prick to be a superstar. And
this is what I mean. Yeah, exactly.
You don't. And by the way, you can be a superstar, be a prick, and that can work for you to win. Like, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but I'm just saying, as far as Arsenal go, okay, my point is, if we recruit a prick, by the way, in the sense of Ted Lasso, there is a time to be a prick, young Jamie Tart. There is a time, and we will give you a signal when to be a prick. No, what it is if we were to change, it would mean changing Arsenal, wouldn't it? Like the press would no longer become our definition and our identity. I don't think you can have a prick superstar and suddenly change them to be out of possession competent. And that to me would represent, and then what? Bukayo Saka is going to say, oh, so you've now just recruited somebody after I've done dog's work for 5 years, and you want me to continue to do the dog's work and let him stay on the last line? Do one. Like, I think that could happen, you know? But if we end up saying, okay, we're no longer going to press like this, we're going to really lean into you as forwards and to be individualistic, Saka would be on board if he can also not do that. It has to be consistent. Yeah. And I don't know. I'm on the case of whatever Mikel thinks it is the right idea to win. I do believe that. But if we want to continue, it's why I've always said the Semenyo and the idea of why that kind of works as a forward out of possession. And, you know, if I was to maybe do it with the Leao, the complete opposite, I can't press with that. You got to shadow, like take out the press if you're going to get a Leao, right? Yeah. And you're going to get that type of forward. So, that's probably what I'll end on as far as like mental compliments, because it's a touchy subject as far as that's concerned. Okay, the pod from the Discord, they kind of asked like, can we redo Scouteds? We can definitely look into that if that's something that you guys want to do. But I do want to ask one question. It was kind of a joke from Ash from the Discord, but I'll end on this. This will be the last question that we do. And it was kind of the case of, okay, links to Gyökeres, can we hire Jason Ato instead? I will just blow up this question because it was kind of a joke, but where does Jason Ato fit for you in the football tree? Where does, as a final maybe conclusion to this pod, how do you see the summer going, in your opinion, as far as the power dynamics go? And I know, like, I'm not asking you to, like, I don't want to put you on a clip a moment, but like, how do you see this relationship with Berta developing? Like, what to you would represent, okay, I think there's good symmetry, but if I walk out of the window and I see this, I know there's good symmetry. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I think for me, straight away, I actually think these Gyökeres links gives me confidence as to Berta already stamping his authority and giving his insight and his thoughts. I think that for me is an immediate positive for me. I think what would be great for us to come out of this end of this window is Arsenal maintaining the good work that they did in the previous summer with sales and being ruthless and being willing to make difficult decisions. Like, I want to see a Kivior go. I want to see a Zinchenko go. I want to see these players go. I don't want Arsenal to hold on and then their value to continue to depreciate going into the next window. You know, so I want us to stamp our authority in terms of sales. I actually think Bert, I think you mentioned this, he could really make himself become a popular person amongst Arsenal fans if he can get one of these big players on a new contract. You know, you're talking a Saka, you're talking a Saliba, you know, this level of magnitude. And then it's about the forwards for me. He has been surrounded by a plethora of attacking talent. I need some of that. I need it. And I think for me, if Arsenal if we come out in good stead in that regard, I'd be very happy, you know. But it's difficult, isn't it? It's like there's so many things we don't know about at the moment. We're speculating, but for me, that would give me really good confidence as to this dynamic working. I'll be consistent. I don't know how much. By the way, I got more than I even thought. Like this Gyökeres link again, even if it's smokescreen or whatever it is, he's coming in, letting people know immediately within 6 hours. He's loud, which, by the way, I thought he would be loud, but it's kind of surprising how quickly that came out. Isn't it? It's good, even if it's not your subjective preference, right? Yeah. He's making his name known there already. Like, 100%. If Arsenal go for a Gyökeres, we're not getting a Sesko. I don't believe we'll go for a Sesko if we get a Gyökeres. And this is the player that also been linked time and time again. You know, so that's a big change. So, yeah.
No, it's brilliant. And so I think already I'm already seeing things that I love from Berta
Yeah.
perspective in the relationship. Kind of like what you alluded to before. I think the contract renegotiations, as unflashy as that is, could really make me say, oh, wow. Okay, like I'm sitting there thinking we're doing business differently. And I will say, I know I've said this a couple times, Zubamendi, Garcia done in the first 10 days of the window. Like I want that speed of negotiations. We're going to exit the Club World Cup and have to come back on June 16th. I want Arsenal to get everything but the forwards done so that the last thing is the forwards. I don't want there to be a question. I don't want there to be rumors and links that we're waiting to sell. I want there to be a smooth process, right?
Yeah.
And I don't want us to be second guessing, trying to sit there and trying to re-engineer a justification for why another Sterling loan or a Neto loan makes it. Like I want, like those two moves to me represent, hey, I solved the frees that are leaving. I solved the number 2 goalkeeper issue. It makes sense for me that the forwards are linked, by the way. Like to me, I think that they're going to be bought bang, bang. I don't think it's a dragged thing. It could be at the end of the window, but I'm just saying the 2 buys are going to be close together because they're so linked in profile as far as like what we've talked about in the pod. So it makes sense to me that that's going to be the last of it. And we can't know now. Like in order to finish the June 1st signings, you need to negotiate now and finish now. But Newcastle aren't talking until they know what the hell happens in Champions League. Like they can have soft tops, but again, if they come out of the Champions League, Isaac has a very different approach. So it makes sense. Like it makes sense to me not to expect that. Even though, by the way, I don't think fans expect it. I'm telling you right now, fans are going to be pissed because I don't think we get a forward until maybe the start of preseason and then into preseason. And I think people are going to be really angry about that. But Berta, I think, can really help by getting really big contracts negotiated. Ethan Miles, by the way, get those signed in preseason. Boom. Like you're talking some serious, faith and faith building there, because that is something that, Edu, I think, did struggle with, right? And of course, the sales. I don't think I need major sales on an individual level, but I definitely I'm looking at the turnover. I have this prediction, mate.
Definitely volume.
I think Arsenal will go through the highest turnover this season. I don't know if they have the highest spend per window, which I think they do, but I will make the bold claim. These are the Berta things that I think happen. Berta will make Arsenal's record one window transfer spend. This one. I think Berta will also have the highest number of transactions as far as sales and buys. I think Andrea Berta as well will get most of the contract renegotiations done as far as Ethan, Miles, Gabriel, and potentially Saliba. I think Saka will stay. He'll be the last one. But I think he'll do those things. And I will boldly say, I believe that in the end, our forward recruitment represents 60 to 70% of our budget. So if we have a £200 million budget, I think 70% of that will be spent on forwards. 60 to 70%. Those I think are the Berta. I think I would be like, wow, that's you making a splash.
If he does that, good on him.
Good on him. Those are some pretty high expectations as well. But we're coming in. Look, mate, it's a big deal. This is a chance, by the way, for Arsenal to be redefined. And you know what I find really interesting, mate?
Yeah.
This is like, it kind of reminds me of the Roanoke's giving the Sean McVay his final thing before the Super Bowl. Like, I think this is the now or never moment from a KSE perspective. And it's just interesting to see what Arsenal are going to be like, because again, very un-Arsenal-like move. Let's see how it pans out. But I think the unpredictability of this, by the way, of the pull of everything that we've discussed, I think leads to me to be like pretty excited about the summer. And we will come back to you with tons of content throughout the summer to keep track of all those beautiful things. Wohan, it's a pleasure as always. Thank you so much.
Always, mate.
And guys, there's a lot of stuff coming up, so absolutely go check some of the stuff. Last week, I believe we had, of course, our TCP Live that Alex and Wohan did. I think we also had a Scouted last week, in which, oh God, who do we do? Lucien Agume, my boy. If you guys can go check him out, of course, the main pod. You'll be hearing this hopefully on a Monday, March 31st. And we will have potentially this week a Madrid rewatch. for you guys coming up. Another TCP Live, and of course, more content as the content machine keeps on rolling. Thank you guys so much. That has been your boy, George VAFC. This has been Wohan, and this has been the Cannon Podcast, and we thank you for all of your support. And thanks for keeping it Arsenal.